Part 212. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2114. When Man Bao heard this, he immediately got out of the car with the medicine box, and said to Xiao Yuanzheng, I go with them first, and we won't go back to Tai Hospital. Xiao Yuan looked at the time, it was already afternoon, and the next morning shift was nothing, so he nodded and agreed. Man Bao took his horse from another guard, stepped on it and walked away. Imperial physician Xiao glanced at the guard who had been left behind and waved, Let's go, I'll give you a ride. Thank you, sir. Man Bao hurried to Tang's house. Fortunately, there is another city gate in the eastern suburbs. Once you enter, you will be in the inner city, and you will arrive after passing through the 4 squares. Arriving at Tang's house, the servant who had been waiting for her immediately took over the horse in her hand, and a maid who was waiting in Madame Tang's house was waiting here, and when she got off the horse, she saluted, Miss Man, our wife has already launched a campaign. Already? Man Bao walked with her carrying the medicine box and asked, Is there nothing unusual? Mammy said, It's all good, it's just 12 days earlier than you estimated. Our wife is a little flustered. Man Bao reassured, she is a twin, it's normal to be earlier. Mammy also has some experience in this area, and she knew early on that their wife was pregnant with twins, and everyone in the family went to find out. But it was still a bit of a panic when things came to an end. After all, it was difficult to have a single child, let alone twins. When they got to the yard, Tang He was already waiting, and when he saw her, he immediately greeted her, Are you here? Man Bao nodded and asked Mammy to make hot water and she wanted to clean her hands, so she asked Tang He, Isn't Tang Shuexian going to the office? I've asked for leave. In fact, he was absent from work, but he was the county magistrate. Who would sue him for being absent from work for half a day? He just said that he went home to find the documents, and no one else could say it was wrong, right? Man Bao washed his hands before going in to see Mrs. Tang. Mrs. Tang was already sweating on her face, biting the cloth tightly without making a sound. Seeing Zhou Man vaguely, her eyes brightened slightly. Po Wen and Zhou Man are also familiar with each other. After all, she often comes to check on Mrs. Tang during this time. Moreover, this imperial Dr. Zhou is well known in the stable woman circle in the capital. At a young age, he successfully delivered 2 mortal pregnant women, and one of them had an abdominal surgery. So Granny Wen immediately stepped aside for her to see, and said, Tutor Zhou, Madam is dizzy and can't make up her mind. Man Bao first took a look at the production situation, then went to feel her pulse and asked, How long has the attack been? A woman looked at the hourglass and said, It's been 3/4 of an hour. It is neither long nor short, she is the second child, and it is said that the delivery will be faster. Man Bao asked Mrs. Tang softly, Sister-in-law is having trouble breathing. Mrs. Tang also knew that her condition was wrong, and while taking a deep breath, said, I don't know why I have been feeling dizzy for the past 2 days. When the amniotic fluid flowed down just now, I didn't have any strength at all. Man Bao reassured, It's okay, I'll give you a few injections and drink a bowl of medicine. You can save your strength now. Now that the amniotic fluid is still enough, the child will be fine for the time being. After that, he turned around and went to prescribe the prescription, handed the prescription to the maid and said, Hurry up, be quick. When the maid heard this, she didn't dare to neglect, she immediately took the prescription and ran out. Man Bao opened the needle bag and gave Mrs. Tang a needle. Soon after the needle was inserted, she regained her spirits and felt that her breathing was much smoother. Man Bao looked at her face, touched her pulse, and continued to take the needle, but it was aimed at her head. The 2 stable wives were stunned, wasn't it a production? Why don't you pierce your belly to pierce your head? Man Bao put 6 needles in her head, and when she saw that she closed her eyes slightly, she seemed to have fallen asleep, so she touched her belly, and whispered to the two wives, "I touched the baby's fetal position and it didn't change." "Yes, Zhou Tai taught his wife to do well, so the fetal position has always been correct." Man Bao nodded with satisfaction, and took the needle again to make the child feel more comfortable in the stomach, so that Mrs. Tang would have more time. The room became quiet and waited for a full 2/4 of an hour before Man Bao took the needle. Madame Tang, who squinted for a while, opened her eyes, and she felt a lot more energetic. The maid also brought the urgently boiled medicine. Came up. They also soaked it in cold water to cool it down. Now that the temperature of the medicine was just right, she brought it to Mrs. Tang to drink. After drinking the medicine, Man Bao looked at her stomach. "I'll give you a rub, and when I get stronger, I'll listen to Granny Wen's words." Madame Tang nodded. Man Bao touched her bulging belly. Maybe Zhou Man pulled out the needle, or maybe it was because of the medicine. The originally silent belly began to move again. Mrs. Tang felt a heart-wrenching pain, but she knew that this was actually the case. It's a good thing, it shows that the child is healthy at this time. After Man Bao massaged several times, Madame Tang couldn't help but let out a painful cry. She immediately gave her position to one of the women, who looked at the opening of the palace and immediately said, "Okay, madam, let's take a deep breath first. Take one breath, hold it in, well, sink down hard, sink down." Madame Tang gritted her teeth and tried hard, and Madame Wen said happily, "Yes, you used the right strength, you used it right, congratulations madam, you have strength, and the child will come down after a few more." Man Bao continued rubbing her belly, occasionally pushing her to help the child in her belly, and there were two stable mothers on the side to guide her, and the first child was born soon. Granny Wen carefully caught the child, cut the umbilical cord and handed it to another Granny Wen, and then continued to look at her belly. Man Bao also touched his stomach, and said to Mrs. Tang, whose eyes were a little sloppy, "There is one more, we can take a break for a while." After saying that, she drew a needle and pierced her a few times. Madame Tang, who was a little pale, regained some energy. Madame Wen looked at her speechless. Half of the mothers who died in the first stage of childbirth were due to the abnormal fetal position, and the other half were due to lack of strength. Mrs. Tang has been dizzy since she started giving birth. Obviously it is the second type. They didn't give much hope. This time, Man Bao only pierced for about half an hour, and then whispered to Madame Tang, "You first slowly mix your breathing, and then come with Mother Wen together." Granny Wen immediately returned to her senses. The first child had already been born, and the second one could not stay for too long, otherwise it would be suffocated in it. Madame Tang nodded, immediately took a few deep breaths, and followed Granny Wen to move. Man Bao massaged her, and after a while, there was movement in her stomach. Maybe the first one was born, and the second one was born easily. Mother Wen was shocked when the child was born, and she glanced at Zhou Man. Zhou Man also saw the child. He was very small, only a little bigger than Mother Wen's palm. She frowned, took the child from her hand, cleaned the filth from his nose and mouth, touched his chest, and nodded when she felt the soft heartbeat, and said in a low voice, "You take care of it first. Lady. Make up." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2115. Granny Wen nodded immediately. She didn't dare to take over such a small child. Man Bao took this to the basin to wash it. The first child finally washed it, and another woman patted her butt, making a low hum. Man Bao gently put the child in his hand into the wooden basin, and clumsily recruited water to wash it for her, and the nanny next to him immediately stepped forward to help. She was much more proficient. She washed the child in 3 or 2 times, wiped it gently with a soft towel, and then patted the child's buttocks. As a result, the child made no sound at all, and she couldn't help looking at Zhou Man anxiously. Man Bao hugged him, carefully felt the pulse of the child, looked at his eyes and mouth again, and said, "It doesn't matter, he is still weak now, so wrap up first." She was handed over to the mother. She went to see the first child. He was also much younger than the average born child, but better than his younger brother. Maybe it was hurt by being photographed, and he was still whispering at this time. Man Bao checked him and found that everything was normal except for the smaller ones, so he was relieved. Only then did she turn around and go to the back room to see Mrs. Tang, while the maid and the maids went out to announce the good news, but only carried the eldest brother out for the Tang County magistrate to take a look. Madame Tang had already fallen asleep, and Granny Wen was taking care of her. When she saw her coming in, she said, "The bleeding is normal, but the body is weak." Man Bao nodded, "She is dizzy, obviously liver and kidney yin deficiency. Water does not contain wood. This is very dangerous during pregnancy. It should be the reason for having twins. It will be fine after conditioning. Pay more attention to these 2 days. Headache, vertigo can easily bleed." She touched her pulse, and simply gave her 2 sets of acupuncture, one to soothe the nerves and help sleep, and the other to stop bleeding. After getting the needle, she went to watch the second child in a daze while waiting for the needle to be pulled. How can such a small child take care of it? The maids and girls in the room were also anxious, and Granny Wen whispered, "It's good that the twins can give birth to such a good one." Man Bao rubbed his hands, and after rubbing his hands warm, he gently massaged his chest and abdomen with his fingertips, and then held him in his arms and gently massaged his back. This was learned from Dr. Tao. Later, teacher Mo found her a similar massage method. It is more complicated than Dr. Tao's, and it is said that the effect is a little better. Man Bao pressed for a quarter of an hour, and the county magistrate Tang was about to panic when he was outside. After turning around twice, he finally couldn't hold back the curtain and barged in. Seeing Man Bao sitting on a chair with a baby in his arms, he hurried. Taking 2 steps forward, the probe asked, "Is this small?" Mammy sighed and pushed him forward. "Master, how can you enter the delivery room? It's not clean here." The magistrate Tang glanced at her and said, "What is clean or unclean? Have I seen less unclean things in this world?" After saying that, she bypassed her and went to see the child, and the mammy didn't dare to stop it any longer. Man Bao felt that the child was a little more angry, so he took out his hand, tightened the swaddle, and said to the county magistrate, "He is a little weak, let's ask Dr. Tao to take a look." Man Bao paused and said, "Dr. Lu is also very good at children's diseases, please invite him again." Tang County magistrate also saw his son. To be honest, it was not the first time he saw a child who was born, but it was the first time he saw such a small one. Tang County magistrate was so distressed that he did not dare to ask if the child would survive. He turned his head to wipe the corners of his eyes and asked, "How is your sister-in-law?" Man Bao said, "She is weak, she can't be stimulated now, so I didn't dare to tell her." She paused and then whispered, "She shouldn't be alarmed at this time, otherwise it's very easy to bleed. Let's ask a doctor for medicine first." Tang County magistrate had no objection, nodded and then turned to his mother, "Let Mingli take my post and go to Imperial Dr. Liu's house," and he said that the family wants to invite Imperial Dr. Liu for an outpatient clinic. Man Bao said, "Today, Imperial Physician Liu is not on duty, and he should be back home around Yushi. Did you hear that? When Yushi, Imperial Physician Liu will be invited as soon as he gets home." He paused and said, "Just say Imperial Physician Zhou is also here." Man Bao glanced at the county magistrate Tang, and didn't mind that he acted in her name. The magistrate Tang smiled at her with a guilty conscience, and then said, "I'll give you a big red envelope later." Seeing such a young child, Imperial Physician Liu did not dare to give any guarantee. After feeling the pulse of the child, he checked other conditions and said to Joe Man, "The heart is too weak, it is very difficult for such a child to survive without the mother's body. I can only prescribe medicine to the nanny, it is better to take care of it than nothing." He added, "However, you can press the child with your hand to dredge the heart and circulate the medicine. If he is lucky and tenacious enough, he might be able to live." He went to see the boss again, and said, "Be careful with this." Man Bao nodded, "The child is too difficult to raise." So the two of them deliberated and prepared two prescriptions, this one is for the nurse of the second son, and this one is for the nurse of the third son. After taking the medicine for a quarter of an hour, breastfeed. Dr. Lu and Man Bao discussed the massage techniques for children. In terms of experience, Dr. Lu is naturally richer. He made several suggestions to Man Bao, and Man Bao also came up with several massage techniques that he knew. Exchange into the evening. After leaving the room, it was found that it was dark. The county magistrate Tang and Man Bao said, "Daji has come to pick you up. I'm waiting in the living room in front. I'll let the kitchen cook the food. You and Lu Taishi have eaten before leaving. Man Bao should go down." Although the situation of a child was not very good, the Tang County magistrate was a little worried, but in the end he was born safely, so he was mostly happy. The kitchen prepared a sumptuous dinner, and Magistrate Tang also brought out fruit wine for everyone to drink. Man Bao only drank a small cup and concentrated on eating, while the Magistrate Tang took Imperial Dr. Lu to cultivate his relationship. He knew that Joe Man would be very busy recently. She wanted to take care of the smallpox experiment at Huangchuang. "I'm going to take a class at the Imperial Physician's office, and I'm afraid I won't be able to come to his house for outpatient clinics. On the contrary, Imperial Physician Lu has one less job, so he should be able to visit often." So he tried his best to cultivate the relationship between the two sides, and Man Bao was also on the side. So after a meal, Imperial Physician Lu agreed to the Tang County Magistrate to come and see the child every 2 days. If the child has any problems, take a post to ask, he will definitely come as long as he is at home. After agreeing, Imperial Physician Lu felt a little regretful. It was too frequent to come here every 2 days, and there was no spare time left. The Magistrate Tang was very satisfied. After sending Imperial Physician Lu away, he also sent Man Bao out, and said to her, "You can come and help when you have time, so that you can also know the changes in the child." Man Bao nodded and warned, "Don't let him get cold, don't heat him, just ask a few more people to take turns watching at night, I will come to see the three of them when I have time." Tang County Magistrate nodded and escorted her into the car. The Zhou family had eaten dinner early, so it was no surprise that she came home late. The Qian family also asked, "Mrs. Tang was born?" Man Bao responded and said, "Mother and child are safe, but the younger child is a little weak. People only give birth to one, and she will naturally be weaker if she gives birth to two." See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2116. The most important thing in raising a child is to be attentive. The poor are raised, and the rich are raised. I think this child is still very good at reincarnation. Raise it slowly, and it will be fine after the confinement. This is money from the experience of raising children over the years, she said. No matter how weak a child is, it will stand on one foot after the full moon. Ding, so we have to take it step by step. They are anxious as parents, but you, a doctor, can't be anxious. Man Bao responded, "Mother, you are amazing." She nodded her nose and smiled, "Little sycophant, no matter how powerful my mother knows, it's only rough, how can a doctor like you know so much?" "It's not," she said. There are some experiences that only you can have, and what you get from books may not be all correct. She smiled and said, "You will know when you become a mother in the future." Speaking of this, Mrs. frowned and looked at Man Bao, hesitated for a while and then asked, "Man Bao, you are not too young now. We originally thought that we would show you the date of marriage next year, not too early." "It's not too late, but what kind of western regions are you going to go to? I heard your fourth brother say that the place is far away." Man Bao said with some guilty conscience, "Actually, it's not very far. Can you come back next year?" After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "If it goes well, it should be fine, but if it doesn't go well, it is possible to stay for 2 more years." Qian sighed, "Then the marriage has to be moved back." She smiled suddenly and said, "It's nothing, the two of you are leaving together, Mrs. Lu should have a plan." Over the years, Man Bao's medical skills have become more and more exquisite. She occasionally hears her talk about some ways to maintain health, and also knows that it is better for girls to marry later and have children. "Did you leave Lu Sunyang until she was almost 20 before she got married without seeing the Lu family?" Thinking of this, Qian became happy again, took Man Bao's hand and said, "Be careful when you go out, don't rush around, no matter where you go. Do you bring people to know? You say girls, even if they are officials, you can't beat a man like a fight." Man Bao nodded again and again. Speaking of this, should she prepare something else, she can use it if she is really in danger, but she is not very familiar with poison. Who is more familiar with poison in the hospital? It seems that I will ask Xiao Yuanzheng after entering the palace tomorrow. Xiao Yuan was listening to Man Bao mentioning this and almost spit out tea. He glanced nervously and found that no one was paying attention, so he went up to close the door and asked in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" "What?" Asking this in the palace, people don't know what they think you are going to do. Man Bao said, "Where do you want to go?" "I'm not going to the western regions. This journey is dangerous, so I want to do something to protect myself." "Xiao Yuanzheng, this matter hasn't been written yet. Did you prepare early enough?" "It's not too early, not too early. If this experiment is successful, I want to go to the western regions." "It's called planning ahead, you know," Man Bao said. "This toxin is not so easy to learn, shouldn't you study in advance?" Xiao Yuanzheng fell silent. After a while, he said, "If you want to say who has the best poison technique in this hospital, no, it should be the best detox technique, and that's me." Man Bao looked at Xiao Yuanzheng in surprise. Xiao Yuanzheng waved his hand at her, "Don't look at me like that, I don't know how to make poison, I just know some detoxification techniques." "It's strange, people who detoxify don't know how to make drugs." Xiao Yuanzheng said, "I have a book at home, I can borrow it for you to read for 2 days later." Man Bao's eyes brightened, and he thanked him again and again, "Thank you Xiao Yuanzheng, you are really a good person." The good man Xiao Yuanzheng felt a pain in his heart, but, just as Zhou Man said, it is too dangerous to go to the western regions, and there is nothing he can do about natural disasters, but there may still be bandits along the way. Do some preparation. She is not only the Taiyuan hospital, but also a rising star in the whole university. With such a talent, Xiao Yuan is reluctant to let her have an accident. Even sometimes he couldn't help but be jealous of her. After they left the palace in the evening, Xiao Yuanzheng sent someone to deliver a book to Man Bao. Man Bao opened the book wrapped in oiled paper and was pleasantly surprised. It is indeed written on the detoxification technique, but there will always be a detailed description of the poison in the detoxification technique, and there are people next to it who use small characters to explain why such detoxification is required. She looked at it and saw that Xiao Yuanzhen's handwriting was very small, which should have been left by his ancestors. Man Bao immediately took it back to the house and copied it. At this time, she missed Bai Shan. Tomorrow she has to go to the imperial physician's office to take a class, and then go to Huangzhuang to see the patient. If there is no accident, they will start to vaccinate tomorrow. Even less. Why don't you go to the palace tomorrow, give the book to Bai Shan, and let him copy it? Man Bao opened the book and read it while planning in his mind. As a result, she had no chance to enter the palace the next day. When she arrived at the imperial physician's office, Imperial Physician Lu gave her a warrant. Xiao Yuan is asking me to give it to you. Mrs. Yang Ho is ill. Xiao Yuan is asking you to take a look. Man Bao stretched out his hand to take the warrant, and couldn't help but wonder, what's wrong with her? The last time I went to Lord Yang's house, his house was still very lively, and it was she who was entertaining guests. Imperial Physician Lu shook his head. Don't you know if you go and have a look? He said, it's not an emergency, just go today. Man Bao received the warrant. Let's go again in the afternoon. After class, we have to go to Huangzhuang to inoculate people. Imperial Physician Lu frowned and reminded with a smile, don't tell people where you came from when you go to see a doctor. Otherwise, if you are not sick, you will be scared to get sick. Man Bao responded, I won't say it on purpose. After class, Man Bao hurried to Huangzhuang. Xiao Yuan Zheng and Imperial Physician Lu were already there. They had checked 12 patients, and when they saw her coming, they said, you can also take a look, if there is no problem, get pox today. Man Bao responded and went to check their bodies. They had been raised for 5 days, and their complexions were much more rosy than before. Although there were some dark ailments on their bodies due to the torture, the problems were not big. Man Bao nodded and agreed to get pox today. So the three of them put on masks and went to the pharmacy to dispense medicines. I used the pimple scabs collected from number 2 and number 3. After they were done, they were stuffed into their noses and marked. It was already half an afternoon when they finished their work. Xiao Yuan took a look at the sky and said, I'll be on duty tonight. You should go back first, Imperial Physician Zhou, don't forget that you still have an outpatient clinic. Man Bao responded, then looked at Imperial Dr. Lu, Dr. Lu, let's go together. Imperial Dr. Lu said sullenly, I am on duty at the Imperial Hospital tonight, and I will go back to sleep now. Man Bao almost forgot about this, looked at him sympathetically, then went to wash first, changed into clean clothes and shoes, and left. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 2117. Mrs. Yang Ho was ill, and it seemed that she was still very ill. Man Bao first transferred to the Imperial Physician's office and found Lu Sunyang as a medical assistant, and then transferred to Yang's house. The imperial doctor who is ordered to go out to the clinic must bring a medical assistant by his side, which is also the rule of the imperial hospital. Although Lu Sunyang and the others are now working as medical assistants in the Taiyuan hospital, they actually spend most of their time in the Taiyuan hospital, and only enter the Taiyuan hospital when they are on duty. On the one hand, they have to study, and on the other hand, they also need to help the doctors to teach. The Department of Imperial Physicians has decided that the first batch of graduates will be selected this winter, and they will be sent to the places that have been built next spring. MD, start preparing for this study. Now there is only one female medical assistant in the Taiyuan hospital, Lu Sunyang. She should not be transferred out, but Zheng Gu and others should be the first batch to release the experience first, and then return to the Taiyuan hospital. When he arrived at Yang's mansion, Butler Yu came out to greet him in person, with a smile on his face. I didn't expect Miss Man to come to see Madam, please come inside. Man Bao said apologetically, I'm busy today, so I've delayed coming here until now. Is Mrs. Ho all right? The smile on Butler Yu's face changed to a worried look, and said, coughing badly, I heard from the mama in the inner courtyard that it will be cold and hot for a while. The imperial doctor was invited only after the solution. Please. Man Bao nodded. She heard that the symptoms were also like a cold. The disease was mild, but it was also serious. If it is easy to cure, 2 medicines will be fine. If it is not cured, you may not be able to save your life. Butler, you only sent people to the second gate, and there was a mama who led them in. Man Bao walked inside for a while, then turned his head and asked Mammy, when will Lord Yang leave for Xiaoshu? Mammy was stunned for a moment and then said, this slave does not know. Man Bao nodded and turned to ask, is Mr. Yang at home now? Mammy responded, yes, it's still on Zhuangzi. Entering the main courtyard, Mrs. Yang Ho was lying on the bed with a cooling cloth on her forehead. Seeing that it was Zhou Manlai, the maids tied up the tent and exposed the person. Man Bao was sitting beside the bed. Lu Sunyang immediately took out the pulse pillow and handed it to her. Man Bao took it, put Madame Yang Ho's hand on the pulse pillow, looked at her face and asked, what is madam? Do you feel unwell? Mrs. Yang Ho did not expect that the imperial physician invited was Zhou Man. Although she was a female imperial physician, it seemed more convenient, but because of her relationship with her stepson, Mrs. Yang Ho was always a little uncomfortable. But it was about her own body, so she didn't dare to fool her, mainly because the past 2 days were really too painful. It's been 4 or 5 days, but I woke up once at night. I don't know if it was blown by the cold wind. I feel a little dizzy, so many doctors are useless. The grandmother on the side immediately said, Tian Dr. Zhou, our wife has been taking medicine, and it seemed to be much better for the first 2 days. As a result, I suddenly developed a fever yesterday, and I fainted, and it seems to be worse than the previous few days. After listening to the pulse, Man Bao looked at her tongue coating and complexion again, and turned to look at her mother. Is the medicine you took before still there? Bring it to me to see. Mammy immediately handed the prescription to Man Bao. Mrs. Yang Ho stared at Zhou Man and asked, is the recipe wrong? Man Bao said, that's right. Although the prescription is not very good, it is symptomatic. Even if it cannot be cured, it will not treat people seriously. She looked at Mrs. Yang Ho and asked, aren't you cold or hot in the back? Madame Yang Ho paused and said, no. Man Bao looked at the big girl who was waiting on the side. The eldest girl couldn't take it anymore, so she lowered her head and whispered, the day before yesterday, Mrs. was a little hot after eating, so I went to the jacket. The window in the room was open at that time, maybe it was because of the wind. Unfortunately, the day before yesterday happened to be a cold spring. Yesterday, Man Bao couldn't resist going out in a cloak. Today is also very cold, not much better than the first month. Man Bao was speechless for a while, looked carefully at Madame Yang Ho's face and said, I'll give you a prescription, and then stick a set of needles to see. She said, you are averse to cold now, be careful, you can no longer suffer from cold and heat. Man Bao asked people to prepare hot water and a brazier. Only then did most of the people retreat and Mrs. Yang Ho unbuttoned her clothes and put needles. It was already 4/4 of an hour after a set of needles was finished. Man Bao put away the needles, looked at Mrs. Yang Ho, who was sweating lightly, and nodded slightly, and said to the servant, give her medicine and cover her with a quilt, it's almost enough to sweat, don't let her take a bath, just dry it with a warm towel. The servants listened carefully, and then respectfully sent them to the second gate. Butler Yu was already waiting, and immediately stuffed the prepared red seal to Zhou Man, and Lu Sunyang also got one. Butler Yu said with a smile, young master Cai asked, it's getting late, does Miss Man want to stay and eat before leaving? Man Bao declined, and she was not familiar with Yang Hui. She asked, when will senior brother Yang leave for Xiaoshu? But housekeeper, you knew this. He smiled and said, the date has been set, that is, the latter, and the uncle will be back tomorrow. Man Bao nodded. She knew that Yang Heshu had not set off to wait for the money from the Ministry of Housing. Since he was determined to be promoted to the prefect of Xiaoshu, he was no longer in a hurry to return to Xiaoshu, but stayed in the capital to move around. Xiaoshu is now short of people, money, and things, so it took a long time to go back to the capital. Now that the big event has been decided, it is natural to get more things before going back. It just so happens that there are people and things in Xiaoshu that need to be cleaned up, and it will take time. Man Bao vaguely heard something from Bai Shan. Rumors are rising in Xiaoshu, and it seems that the Niu family will not be able to stay in Xiaoshu. After leaving the Yang residence, Man Bao nodded to the housekeeper, then got on the carriage and went straight home. Lu Sunyang didn't go back to the imperial physician anymore, and went home with Man Bao. Man Bao kept a record of Mrs. Yang Ho's pulse in the study, and kept it in the imperial hospital tomorrow. She sat at the desk and pondered, and Zhou Liru, who was beside her, couldn't help but ask, "Little aunt, is there something wrong with this pulse case?" "No, it's just not easy to treat," she said. "It's estimated that you need to take medicine for half a month. It's been cold in spring recently, and the weather is very cold. You should be careful when you go in and out." In fact, Man Bao was thinking about the 12 patients in Huangzhuang. When she went to Huangzhuang the next day, she reached out and touched their quilts, and said to Xiao Yuan, "You have to add a quilt to them, otherwise they will be infected. The cold, I am afraid it will affect the results." Xiao Yuan Zheng agreed after a little thought, but a new quilt was not cheap, so he took money from the public and asked him to go to the pawn shop to choose 12 quilts. It was the first time that Man Bao saw someone who bought a quilt from a pawn shop. Xiao Yuan Zheng smiled and said, "It's a bit like a world-renowned fireworks now. What in this world can't be bought from a pawn shop?" He said, "The Ministry of Household dislikes the high cost of our report these 2 days. This is something that can't be helped. It's better to save some. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2118. When the washed old quilt was delivered, all 12 of them had acne, and the cold wind was still blowing. Although it was already March, it was as cold as the winter moon. Even Xiao Yuan Zheng, the imperial physician, couldn't help standing under the eaves and looking at the dark clouds in the sky. "I'm afraid this year will be difficult. It's already March, and the rice is about to be planted, but it's still so cold." Man Bao shrank his neck and said, "No, my father is about to get sick at home." When imperial physician Lu came out and saw the two of them were looking up at the sky, he said angrily, "Number 5 and number 7 have a high fever, you should go and have a look." Xiao Yuan Zheng and Man Bao looked away from the sky, put on masks and went in to see number 5 and number 7. 12 patients developed pimples almost on the front and back feet. This time, the pimples were much better than last time. No matter whether they used the second or third vaccine, the pox was not as severe as the first time. In particular, the 6 people who used vaccine number 3 had much milder symptoms. 2 young people even had a few pimples on the front of their necks and arms, but they had disappeared in 2 days. The vaccinations on the 5th and 7th were the vaccinia of the 2nd, and they were fine in the morning. At this moment, they suddenly had a high fever. Man Bao felt the pulse, nodded with Xiao Yuan Zheng, and then went to prepare for acupuncture. It was already half the afternoon when the 3 of them finished their work with the 12 patients. Today, Man Bao was on duty, so Xiao Yuan and imperial physician Lu went to change their clothes and say goodbye. Man Bao leaned on the door and waved goodbye to them. After their carriage was far away, he turned back to the house and took out the detoxification scripture to continue copying and studying. He said he would lend it to her for 2 days, but Man Bao has not returned it to Xiao Yuan Zheng until now. There are still many things here that she can't understand. This time, because the number of people in the test is relatively large, the palace and the court are also paying more attention. Xiao Yuan Zheng basically reports the progress to the emperor every day. A pox, and there was never even a high fever, and the emperor almost couldn't help himself to see it. However, the emperor was stopped, and then Wei Ji and the others teamed up to take a look. Naturally, they were wearing masks and stood at the window and looked in. In the end, Wei Ji turned over their pulse cases and asked Xiao Yuan Zheng, "So, number 9, number 11, and number 12 are now healed?" "Yes," Xiao Yuan Zheng said, "in 2 days, after all the acne on their bodies has disappeared, I will test it with fresh acne paste to confirm that the vaccine that has been planted is useful, and I will not get infected again if I come into contact with smallpox in the future." "Superior." Wei Ji nodded, and went to another room to see number 5 and number 7, which were burning badly. After a long silence, he asked, "Can they survive?" Xiao Yuan Zheng was silent for a while and then said, "Actually, their symptoms of acne are smaller now than the previous number 2, but they are not as good as number 2. Now I am not sure that they will survive." Wei knows, so this vaccine is still very dangerous. 2 of the 12 people are seriously ill. What if they all use the number 3 vaccine? At present, the toxicity of vaccinia on number 3 is much lower. At least no one who has been vaccinated on number 3 has high fever. Number 4 and number 6, who are in the same age group as number 5 and number 7, are also improving now. Man Bao persevered and reminded, the toxicity of cowpox should be less than that of number 3 vaccinia. Wei Ji couldn't help discussing it with Lord Tang and others, and after returning to the palace, he said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, the method of vaccination is indeed feasible, but the current human acne is still quite toxic, and I am afraid it is not suitable for the people of the Jin dynasty. They are all vaccinated, especially those who are a little older. It is more difficult for them to recover than children. Therefore, I think we should find a safer method than human pox." The emperor asked, "Do you use the cowpox that Zhou Man said? But how is it grown? I have never seen a cow with pox." Wei Ji had never seen it either, but that didn't mean it didn't, and Zhou Man swore that she proposed this kind of pox method, so the cowpox method should also exist. Wei Ji thought that he should look for it. If he could find it, it would be a great event for the future. Smallpox is rare, but if it does, it must be hell. If this disease can be prevented. Wei Ji thought of this, and the emperor naturally thought of it too. He pondered for a while and said, "Let's talk about it after all the 12 trials are over this time." Wei Ji responded. Man Bao quickly got the wind and said that he would say it after the end, but everyone knew that the emperor was relenting. So she immediately went to find the prince excitedly. His Highness the Crown Prince had a headache when he saw her. Some time ago, Zhou Man brought the medicinal wine he made to strengthen his body and came to the East Palace for a relationship, and asked the prince to transfer Mr. Zhuang to Honglu Temple. It was the first time he had seen him walking through the back door so openly. The prince looked back. It was the only way to go to the council hall. It seemed that he couldn't turn around. "Mr. Zhuang is so old, why do you have to toss him? Why don't you just choose any official in Honglu Temple and go with you?" Man Bao said, "Mr. is in good health, and he wants to go to the western regions himself. Your Highness, please help and transfer Mr. to Honglu Temple." The prince looked at her suspiciously. "Do you really go to the western regions this time just for cowpox?" He always felt more than that, otherwise why would they care so much for others to follow? Man Bao thought for a while and felt that there was no need to hide the matter of the poisonous stone from the crown prince, so he said, "Does your Highness still remember the poisonous stone from the western regions?" The prince frowned. Man Bao said, "That thing left in the wild is a hidden danger, so I want to find it and destroy it. This is one of the reasons, and the other is because we are going to the western regions this time for a study tour." She said a little embarrassedly, "It's not good to ask others to follow us around. This time I went out not only to find a way to get pox, but if I encounter other medical skills that I have never seen before, I will also learn a thing or two. Yu Honglu. I am afraid that there will be a lot of dissatisfaction with other officials of the temple. It's inconvenient to go out, who doesn't want to end a business trip and go home early? Especially if you are going to a desolate place like the western regions on business, the sooner you go home, the better. If the people who go with them can't speak the same way, there will inevitably be a lot of trouble. The prince was silent for a while, but in the end he didn't resist her request, nodded and said, "Okay, give it a try." When Man Bao heard this, he became happy, and immediately thanked him. "Thank you, Your Highness, for your accomplishment. Since the prince is willing to try, it must be successful. Honglu Temple is not an important department, and there is no need to transfer a person to Mr. Zhuang's high-ranking officials. It is just a matter of his words." Mr. Zhuang knew that Man Bao had done this alone, then shook his head with a smile, and said to her, "Why be so impatient? The teacher has already mentioned it to the prince, and he has already agreed." Man Bao was taken aback. "The prince promised you? Then why does he still look embarrassed when he accepts my gift?" Mr. Zhuang smiled at her and shook his head. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2119. Mr. Zhuang is now a servant of the 6th grade, and the prince did not transfer him, but directly stuffed people into Honglu Temple to work part-time. Honglu Saiking knew more about the inside story, and didn't mind that there was such a person in the department. He told his subordinates like this: "If there is no accident, His Majesty will go to the western regions this February to find the smallpox vaccination method. At that time, there will be one person from Honglu Temple, but Zhuang Sun will not come. Maybe who of you would like to go with Zhou Tei from the Imperial Hospital?" The person who thought that Zhuang Sun had taken the seat was also speechless. Western regions, how can it be so good to go? Especially since they are still a group of literati. Forget it, it would be nice to do some translations in Honglu Temple. So Mr. Zhuang's appointment book came down like this. Man Bao was overjoyed, and happily said to Bai Shan, "In this way, we can go out to study with confidence without having to resign." Bai Shan is also very happy. After all, they have already given up the investment of Zhuangzi for the past 2 years. Who knew that they could turn around? He asked, "How are the 12 patients?" 6 of them have completely disappeared. Man Bao said that he felt a little depressed here, and said, "Number 5 didn't get through last night, but number 7 is much better today. I used 3 sets of acupuncture for him yesterday, and today most of the fever has subsided. As long as it doesn't recur, it should be fine. Everyone else is getting better." Bai Shan said, "Then we can write a book and talk about our trip to the western regions." Man Bao nodded. "Wait for all the connections to come out, so that you can get more confidence in the book." Within 2 days, the remaining 5 patients were also out of danger one after another, and the pimples on their bodies gradually disappeared. Some people had pimple marks on their bodies because they couldn't resist scratching, but compared with their lives, few people cared about this. Besides, they are all repeat offenders. Man Bao sorted out their pulse cases and presented them to the emperor together with the imperial physician of Xiaoyuan Zhenglu. There was not much expression on the emperor's face, but he was actually a little excited. With the current probability, even if the cowpox method cannot be found, the human pox can also be used. Man Bao and Xiaoyuan looked at each other, bowed their heads and replied, "Yes, if we encounter smallpox raging, our active vaccination is much better than unintentional infection, but the shortcomings of human pox are also visible. The reaction is still a bit big, and many people can't help scratching, leaving pock marks on their faces. The pock mark is equivalent to a disability, which is why it is still a very serious disease." The emperor nodded thoughtfully, handed the pulse case back to Xiaoyuan Zheng, and asked him and imperial physician Lu to retire, leaving Zhou Man behind. He said, "The queen has something to ask you. You can stay and have lunch with the queen." Man Bao froze for a moment and then lowered his head. In fact, it was the emperor who wanted to ask her something, and their movements were not small. Recently, Bai Erlang was saying goodbye to people in Changguan Hall, and he even received gifts. The emperor asked her, "Bai Shan and Bai Cheng also go to the western regions with you?" Man Bao lowered his head and answered with a guilty conscience, "They also want to go and see what the western regions are like." The emperor snorted softly, "Do you want to see what the western regions are like, or is it because this is a study tour planned early in the morning?" Man Bao didn't expect the emperor to know, so he lowered his head and dared not defend. The emperor walked slowly with his hands behind his back, and said after a while, "Young man, I know, you should walk more. It is better to travel thousands of miles than to read thousands of books." Man Bao nodded again and again, "Yes, yes, sir always said that the third junior brother had no plans in his mind, and he should go out to experience more." The emperor glanced at her and asked, "So is there really a cowpox method in the western regions?" Man Bao immediately said solemnly, "I heard this from a merchant in the western regions, Your Majesty, how dare I lie about such a thing?" The emperor also felt that she would not lie about such a matter, so asking this was just to confirm it again. He sighed and said, "If that's the case, then go back and prepare." Man Bao was overjoyed and immediately bowed and saluted, "Yes, Your Majesty, this minister must not disgrace his mission." After the ceremony, he asked, "Then shall I go to accompany the empress for lunch?" "Emperor, Mingda and Changjiao are still waiting for you, go ahead." Man Bao immediately saluted and retired, and ran to the queen's palace first. The emperor shook his head, Gu Zhong smiled and said, "Your Majesty, Lord Zhou still looks like a child." The emperor said, "It wasn't that big at first, so I have been hesitant to ask them to go to the western regions. The three young people are still too young. Isn't there another talk by Zhuangxi? It's too old again." The emperor remembered something, and suddenly smiled and said, "This matter is not urgent, just wait, and then see where to send two people to them." Gu Zhong was puzzled, and the emperor didn't explain, so Yozei walked away with his hands behind his back. When Man Bao went to the queen's palace, Mingda and Chang Yu were sitting cross-legged on the couch for embroidery. When they saw her coming, Chang Yu immediately threw the embroidery shed in his hand and jumped down. He didn't even have time to put on his shoes, so he directly absorbed the embroidery shed. Then he ran towards her, "Are you here to ask for the ping and pulse for your mother?" The queen glanced at the flower that was half embroidered by Changjiao, shook her head, and no longer restrained her. Man Bao smiled at Chang Yu and bowed to the queen first. The queen asked with a smile, "Your Majesty asked you to come?" Man Bao responded, "His Majesty asked her to come and see her, and said that she had something to tell me." The queen knew that the emperor had promised to let them go to the western regions. She smiled slightly, and turned to look at the big palace maid beside her. The big palace maid turned around and went to the inner room, and after a while, she came out with a box. The queen opened the box, and inside was a short dagger with a black leather scabbard. She took it out and pulled the dagger in half, and the light hit the blade, reflecting some dazzling rays of light. She turned the knife and said with a smile, "This is the knife of Princess Pingyang. First, you are going to the western regions, the journey is long and dangerous, I have nothing else to give you, so I will give you this knife used by Princess Pingyang, I hope to keep you safe." Man Bao was surprised and did not dare to take it for a while. "Give it to me? Wouldn't it be bad?" The queen put the knife into the scabbard and put it in her hand with a smile, "There's nothing wrong with this, Your Majesty knows it. Smallpox is not stingy with floods and beasts. If you can find a way to prevent it, you will not be able to credit Ho Xiang. You deserve the knife." Man Bao grabbed the short knife and nodded earnestly after a while, "Don't worry, Madam, I will definitely work hard. Try to discuss the cowpox method with Mr. Mo, and then implement it. The Queen nodded with satisfaction, nodded slightly and smiled, let's have lunch here at noon today. She glanced at Mingda who was sitting beside her, got up and said with a smile, this palace still has some palace affairs to deal with, you talk first. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2120. As soon as the Queen left, Chang Yu pulled Man Bao to the couch, but winked at Mingda, someone wants to ask a question, but I'm embarrassed. Mingda smiled and said, what's wrong with me? She turned her head and said to Man Bao, it's cold this year, it's already March and it's still cold in spring. I heard from the Qin Tianjian that it's probably still snowing in the north. When are you going to leave? After calculating the time, Man Bao said, I plan to go before and after Qingming. I don't know when I will be able to reach Jiaokang. When I arrive in Jiaokang, I may not be able to find it right away, so if you leave earlier, you can come back earlier. Mingda was a little envious, but she knew that it was impossible for her to follow. Not to mention that she was not married now, even if she was married, her parents in a remote place like Jiaokang would not allow her to go. She took Man Bao's hand and said, I often write to us along the way to report safety, and let us know what fun places you've been to. Man Bao nodded in response, and then asked with a smile, do you have anything for me to bring to others? Mingda's face turned slightly red, and she couldn't help scratching her, you laugh at me like Sister Changjio. The three laughed for a while, and then Mingda said, there is something I want to entrust to you, but I haven't received it yet, and I will wait a few days. Man Bao said, he is still studying in Chongguan Hall. If you have anything, just give it to him. Chang Yu leaned on the couch and smiled, that's what I said too. It would be nice for the two of you to talk face to face if you have something to say. If we have to spread the word, we don't mind listening to your whispers, just for fear of you being embarrassed. Mingda pursed his lips and smiled, and no longer refused. Man Bao simply said, let's go to Chongguan Museum together after lunch. Mingda, aren't you busy with business? Man Bao counted his fingers to show her, everyone in Huangzhuang has recovered, and even the pulse case has been done. It is Xiao Yuanzhen's job to file, I'm not on duty at the Tires hospital today, and the Imperial Physician's office has not. Class, if it's outside, Xiao Yuan is asking me to see Mrs. Yang Ho again, but it's not urgent, I can go before it gets dark, so I'll be fine in the afternoon. Mingda was speechless, you're really busy. No, so it's rare to steal half a day to play with you. However, Chang Yu was very interested in Madame Yang Ho's illness, so he pulled the topic back and asked, why is Madame Yang Ho so ill? It's been 7 or 8 days, right? Yeah, it's been 10 days, Man Bao said. The wind has entered the body and has been infected with the cold, and it's still aversion to the cold, but I've seen her a while ago, and it's much better. Chang Yu hummed, I heard that Master Yang was forced by her to avoid Zhuangzi outside the city as soon as she came back, so you can't be too complacent, or God won't be able to see it. Man Bao was taken aback and asked, when did this happen, why don't I know? Chang Yu glanced at her, didn't you hear it outside? Mr. Yang moved to the outskirts of the city just a few days after returning to Beijing. He lived in the outskirts of the city until he left the capital. Man Bao, isn't that to hide from tranquility? Look, even my own house is not quiet, so you can see what kind of bullying Mr. Yang is. Man Bao. Mingda pulled Man Bao and said with a smile, don't pay attention to her, the palace has been very boring recently, and she has been holding grievances for Lord Yang. The three of them were gossiping, and they didn't come back until the noontime. It is said that the queen went to have lunch with the emperor, and the three of them occupied the queen's Taiji palace. Man Bao said, the meal in the queen's palace is really delicious. Chang Yu also thought it was delicious. Next time we are about to have lunch, let's talk to the mother again. Mingda couldn't help laughing out loud. Man Bao was also happy, and the three of them laughed and went to Chongguen Museum. Chongguen Hall had only had lunch at this time, and it was the break time. Seeing the arrival of the two princesses, the students quickly got up and saluted. In the end, everyone watched with envy as Bai Shan and Bai Erlang took in or followed the two princesses to the observation tower. Actually, being a concubine is pretty good. You didn't say that when you chose your concubine, and you said that you would rather be a dummy than an emperor's son-in-law. That would have to be done by him. He would say this because he knew that His Majesty would despise him, but he was just giving himself face. Bai Er has been jumping up and down in the past 2 days, and now the princess has come in person. Do they really want to go to the western regions? Mostly it's true. I heard from my father that the patients in the Thai hospital in Huangzhuang have tried twice, and the acne method seems to really work. This is about the Imperial Hospital, right? With the addition of a Hongla temple at most, what are Bai Shan and Bai Cheng going to join in the fun? Hey, what are you talking about? Zhou Man is Bai Shan's fiancé. Can he rest assured that she will go so far alone? From here to the western regions, the way is either the grassland or the desert, and the people there are very savage. Feng Zonping listened to them more and more, and said, "You keep it a little bit, she is now a 5th-rank official." The voices of several people became smaller, but they still smiled tacitly. Feng Zonping shook his head and said, "Bai Shan has already passed the Jinshi examination, and his ranking is not low. After passing the examination of the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Personnel, he can be awarded an official. Although it is a little urgent to go out after the examination, it is not impossible." He said, if he is interested, he can take the examination of the Ministry of Personnel. Now he is waiting for the appointment of an official just like Ziyang. Based on his impression in front of His Majesty and His Royal Highness, he asked for an official position to be sent to the western regions. It's not difficult, but he didn't do it, and he knows that he's here for a study tour, not for those messy reasons you think. A few people were quiet, not too funny. Feng Zonping shook his head and said, "You guys really plan to be a fool for the rest of your life. Ziyang is already waiting for an official appointment, now Bai Shan and Bai Cheng are going to leave the palace, and Marun and the others are also following His Highness now. There are errands around, and we will be the only ones left in the entire Chongguen Museum. As for me, I have already planned to take the Jinshi exam again next year, and if I fail, I will consider taking the Mingjing exam." He glanced over, "How about you?" Lu Yu and the others froze for a while, unable to speak for a while. Zhao Liaolang smiled schadenfreude aside and said, "I'm not in a hurry, my father said, I just need to study honestly and not get into trouble. When His Highness does not need a companion, then I will ask His Majesty for grace to be a bodyguard. Go, let's go drink together when I'm not on duty." Lu Yu etal, the heart is even more congested. Feng Zonping shook his head. "Zhou Man is a few years younger than us, and now he is a 5th-grade editor and a 5th-grade imperial doctor. If there is a result of the vaccination, she must have contributed a lot, even if she can't be named a marquis like a man. She is also the mainstay of Dajin. What can you laugh at her for? See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2121. After all, Feng Zonping got up and left, not with them anymore. Zhao Liaolang also glanced at Lu Yu and the others, got up and left. The few people left looked at each other, and one of them looked at Lu Yu. "Are we disgusted?" Lu Yu said irritably, "You ask me, who am I to ask?" Before the Jinshi examination, what they learned was different, and the prince got older and older. Although he still had to come to the Chongguen Hall every 3 or 5 years, many of the classes were incomprehensible to their observers. Sometimes the lecturers simply called the prince to another room alone for class, and they were still learning the classics. I didn't think there was anything at first, but after the Jinchi examination last year, Kong Jiju began to arrange some correction books for them. This kind of work is boring to death, reading books is tiring enough, and they have to correct books, they almost get headaches when they see books. During the 4 months when Bai Shan and the others went to Xiaohu, they got the book right for 4 months, and now they feel sick when they see the book, but Bai Shan and the others took over the job after returning, and they seem to be doing it with relish. In this comparison, it seems that they are very different. Although they are really not that great. Man Bao sat on the observation deck, raised his hand to pour tea for everyone, and asked Bai Shan, "Have your books been corrected today?" Bai Shan nodded, "Almost. I copied the book you wanted last time, and I'll give it to you later." Bai Erlang talked to Mingda, "I heard that there is a kind of ice chrysanthemum in the western regions. It is best to use it to make tea. When the time comes, I will pick it up and have someone bring it back to you." Chang Yu was bored and said, "I'll give you ice chrysanthemum from all the way. I heard that the gems in the western regions are particularly beautiful." Bai Erlang said, "I will buy it too." Man Bao also became interested, and asked Chang Yu, "Do you want us to bring some for you?" Chang Yu's spirit was lifted and he became happy. "I don't know what color it is." "What color do you like?" she said. "I heard my fourth brother say something about the precious stones brought by the merchants in the western regions, and they will keep them for sale. It's not very good to sell first." "Yes, the best ones are often kept, and in the end, I don't know who they will sell to." Chang Yu said, "I like red. The brighter the color, the better it looks. You can look back and pay attention to it. If there is one, just buy it and bring it back to me." Man Bao nodded, "If I have enough money, I will buy it for you." When Chang Yu heard this, she felt a little unsure of her ability. "When are you going? I'll send you some money and bring some more." "Don't be sad when you see good things but don't have the money to buy them." Mingda said, "Don't bring too much. I heard from the royal father and the others that you can't reveal your wealth when you go out." Chang Yu, "Just bring some more bodyguards. Who would dare to violate my name as De Jin?" Bai Shan thought to himself, "It is impossible to bring more, they don't mind more people, but business trips require money, and there are regulations, and the Ministry of Officials and the Honglu Temple of the Taiyuan Hospital can't let them mess around." Sure enough, as soon as the matter of the mission to the western regions was brought up, the ministries set the number for them. This time, it was to find a way to prevent smallpox, so the mission was headed by Zhou Man, and the Honglu Temple was still a subordinate. Therefore, the emperor directly promoted her to be the editor of Zhengyupan, the embassy, and Zhuang Sun, a walker of Honglu Temple, as the deputy ambassador, and then selected 2 people to go with them after the Honglu Temple. The main envoy can bring 2 followers, and the deputy envoy and below are all 1 follower. As for the extra, the court does not interfere, but is not responsible for their accommodation. Bai Shan, Bai Erlang and others belong to the multi-band. The emperor said, "I will wait until I go back and think about what else needs to be added. Just submit a letter to Zhongsha province." Man Bao couldn't understand this for a while, and after taking orders to leave, he asked Xiao Yuanzhang, "What do you mean by your majesty? Can I ask for more people and things? Otherwise why ask what else to add? In fact, she still has a lot to add." Xiao Yuanzhang glanced at her and said, "Your majesty didn't say this for you, so you just need to put it in your left ear and go out to your right ear, you don't have to take it to your heart." Man Bao was even more puzzled. "It wasn't for me, but who was it for? I'm the envoy, isn't this the most relevant thing to me?" Xiao Yuanzhang felt that she was very noisy, so he quickened his pace. "You will know later. Why are you asking so many questions? Are you busy with your work? You are going to the western regions, and the one who should teach Lu Sunyang should teach her. Now, in the future, she will take over from you to teach the students, as well as the book you are studying. Didn't you say that there are still 2 chapters left? Hurry up, you have to do it before you go out, it will be used in school. Man Bao saw that Xiao Yuan was talking and walking away, and she had to trot to catch up, so she couldn't help but stop. With luck, she couldn't help humming twice and turned to find Mr. Zhuang. Humph, if she doesn't tell her, won't she ask Mr. Zhuang? After listening to Mr. Zhuang, after a little thought, he asked, has anyone approached you and expressed their desire to go to the western regions with you? Man Bao shook his head, no, we are looking for smallpox outside, who would want to go with us? Mr. Zhuang said with a smile, then let it go for the time being. If anyone is interested, they will come to the door. Man Bao was at a loss, but she could only listen to what Mr. Zhuang said. Mr. Zhuang put the book aside and asked, are you going to live in the palace again? Yeah, Man Bao said, the experiment has ended, and Xiao Yuan is asking me to hand over my work to Sun Yang as soon as possible, so I've been very busy recently, so it's much more convenient to live in the palace. Mr. Zhuang did not keep her anymore and let her go. Man Bao just went out when a guard stepped forward to stop her. Lord Zhou Xiao, our lord wants to see you. Man Bao looked at him curiously, who are you adults? Guard, Lord Zhou Xiao, I am the Imperial Army. Oh, it's Lord Yin. Man Bao looked around, let's go, where is Lord Yin meeting me? Seeing that she accepted it so well, the guards could only turn around and lead the way. It's not easy for us adults to come to the East Palace, so we'll wait in the West Inner Garden, please. Man Bao went to 11 Inner Garden with him. Yin Li was shooting arrows in the martial arts field, and when he saw Zhou Manlai, he shot the arrow in his hand, and then smiled and waved to her, Master Zhou also come to try. Man Bao stepped forward, looked at the bow in his hand, looked at his arm, and shook his head, I can't draw such a heavy bow. Yin Li smiled, handed the bow in his hand to the guard, and asked someone to bring a pair of small bows, this pair is only 5 buckets, you try it? Man Bao took it in his hand and slowly tried to pull it away. When Yin Li saw that she was able to pull away completely, admiration flashed in his eyes, and he instructed her on how to take arrows and aim. Man Bao also learned the 6 arts of a gentleman. When they were in the village, they played with slingshots, and they learned bows and arrows after entering Yazhu city. But she didn't learn much. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang had to learn every day. She only knew how to do it, so she was not proficient. Man Bao let go of the arrow, and the arrow flew out. Because Yin Li helped her correct it, it hit the red heart. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2122. Yin Li nodded with satisfaction, stared at the bow in her hand and sighed, this bow is for Orr. Man Bao was surprised and looked down at the bow and arrow in his hand, could Yin pull it up? Unfortunately, because I am weak, I have not been able to send this bow. Lord Zhou is a woman and has little strength. I will send this bow to you. Man Bao declined, how good is this, since it is for Yin or, even if he doesn't need it now, it's good to keep it as a souvenir. Yin Li shook his head, something has value only if someone uses it, and it's really living up to it if it's left as ash. Man Bao didn't know how to refuse, but she didn't know what was the use of holding a bow and arrow. The fights that required her to get on were basically dying struggles. If you can't refuse, accept it. Man Bao thanked Yin Li with a smile in his arms. Seeing her smile, Yin Li's round face was full of obedience, and she sighed in her heart for a while, it's her daughter, she looks obedient and considerate. Turning to think, he also has daughters, and there are quite a few, but he does not have her caring, let alone her ability, and his heart is complicated for a while. So it's not the daughter or the son's problem, but the person who gave birth? Yin Li rubbed his forehead and asked Zhou Man to sit in the lounge next to the martial arts field. Man Bao put Xiao Gong aside, sat on the chair, and took the tea poured by Yin Li with both hands, but she was thinking hard. She didn't look for Yin or do anything bad recently. Could it be that Bai Shan and Bai Erlang secretly searched for Yin or did something behind her back, and then was counted on her head by Lord Yin? Man Bao held the tea and thought deeply. He didn't know if he was looking for an excuse to slip away first. He went back and asked Bai Shan and the others if they had time. Yin Li glanced at the guard, and the guard went down and brought a plate of small steamed buns. Facing the eyes of the adults, the guards put down the things without squinting and left. What can he do? So let's take the steamed buns as a snack for now. When Man Bao regained his senses, he saw the steamed bun pushed to him. She paused and said, "Master Yin, I'm not hungry." Master Yin glared secretly at the guard who had left, and smiled at her. "Then leave it alone, Master Zhou, or ER's body has always been helped by you. I asked the old Dr. Tan to show him a few days ago. However, the old Dr. Tan means that although he is still weak, he has made up for it." Man Bao nodded. Yes, his foundation has been made up. After a while, she pointed out, but there are some things he didn't have in the beginning, so no matter how he made it up, he couldn't make it up. He will be more careful than others in the future. Yin Li folded his hands together, looked at Man Bao with bright eyes and asked, "How can it be considered meticulous?" When Man Bao heard this, she put down the teacup. In fact, she had been thinking about whether to have a good talk with Yin Li. Yin Or's disease was brought about in the womb, and his weakness was engraved in his genes. Even if he was conditioned, it would only make his weakness less fatal. But Yin Or's disease was not just brought on by the womb. He is also mentally ill. He is the most sensitive of all the people Man Bao has ever met, and his emotions hurt the body, but at the same time, his emotions can also recuperate the body. His physical condition sometimes fluctuated greatly, and laymen might be puzzled, but she knew that it was mostly because of his overthinking. Even if they have a good relationship, it is impossible to be honest, ask everything, and say everything. So they try to communicate as normal as possible. When he wants to say something, they will ask him, and if he doesn't want to, they will stop. This kind of care is okay once or twice, but if it happens more often, there will always be people around you who will feel irritable. But it's not enough for them to work hard with a few friends. Others around him also need to help. Man Baidao, it's not difficult to reach places that the decoction and medicine can reach. The Yin family has money and resources, and no matter what medicine is prescribed, it can be found. Therefore, if you want to have better results, you must do what the medicine can't do. The place. Yin Li asked, for example, to make him feel comfortable. Man Bao smiled and said, the 4 characters of Shun Xi and Changyi are very difficult. It's enough to keep him from burning his heart and feeling sad. Yin Li fell silent. 2. How difficult the 4 words of Shengzhengkangji are. Let's not say, if he asked him to give him a healthy body, where would he get it for him? But it is possible to do without burning the heart and sorrow. Yin Li squeezed his thumb and said after a while, perhaps I want to go to the western regions with you. Man Bao was startled and straightened his waist. He wants to go to the western regions. Seeing such a big reaction from her, Yin Li knew that she didn't know about it. I'm afraid Bai Shan and Bai Cheng don't know it now. It seems that this is indeed the child's own idea. Yin Li smiled bitterly in his heart, but there was no expression on his face. He nodded and said, yes, so I came to Lord Zhou just to ask if he can go away. Man Bao pondered, there's nothing wrong with him. Didn't he go to Xiaohu before? It was almost a hasty march at the time, and he didn't have anything to do. Man Bao thought about it carefully, and his heart was excited, but he tried to hold the corner of his mouth up and said, although we are going to the western regions, we will not march in a hurry, and the main thing is comfort. If the weather is bad or you are seriously ill, we will stop and rest. Yin Li stared at Zhou Man's face, and seemed to see her happiness. He shook his head slightly, knowing that if he kept asking, he would get all affirmations. He simply stopped asking Yin or his physical problems, and instead asked about their planned itinerary. Where do you plan to go, where do you go along the way? Manbao's destination is Jiaokang, but there are also many ways to go from the capital to Jiaokang. They plan to go from Xiaohu to Huayuan, go to Liangzhou after leaving the Great Wall, and go west after leaving Yumen Pass. If you are walking, you can reach Jiaokang in about 2 months. This itinerary can't be picked out even by Yin Li. The plan all the way is to take the official road or the famous Chama road. It is not remote and the safety is quite high. Yin Li figured it out in his heart. If they set off next month, they should be able to reach Jiaokang in June. I don't know if the cowpox solution is easy to find. If they can find it within a month, they can return in July. I will be able to return to Chang'an in September. After such a calculation, it seems that it is not so difficult to accept my son to go for a walk in the western regions. However, Yin Li, who knew that there was no shortage of surprises in the world, still made up his mind and asked, "Have you ever figured it out, if there is an accident, how long will it take for you to go on an envoy this time?" Man Bao, 3 years. Yin Li, how much? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2123. Man Bao smiled and said, "That's what we said. In fact, we guess that 1 or 2 years should be enough. Just planned a 5-month Yin Li for them." He was curious, "How do you all plan your time?" Man Baodao, I heard that there is a Foshan in Liangzhou. There are cliffstone carvings on the mountain. We want to go and see it. We will stay for 4 or 5 days. Into the customs. Yin Li understood, the 5 months he counted did not count as the time they spent watching Jing or go shopping, but according to their plan, 5 months would not be enough for them, right? Yin Li suddenly felt more at ease, and didn't ask at all, and let her leave with the bow he gave. Man Bao ran directly back to Chongguan Museum. As soon as she entered the door, she went straight to the classroom. There were only 8 people in the classroom, and each of them had a lot of books piled on their desks. Most of them were looking at the books in front of them with headaches. Zhao Liaolang grabbed the pen, and his brows were about to wrinkle. Man Bao slipped to the back door, glanced inside with the probe, but didn't find a gentleman inside, then looked behind him, and made a puchi-chi sound when he saw that no one was paying attention. Everyone in the classroom raised their heads and looked at them with bright eyes. Seeing that it was Zhou Man, most people's eyes dimmed, and they lowered their heads and ignored her. How could it be her? It's boring. Bai Shan glanced outside, quietly got up and walked to the last table to sit down. Man Bao saw a figure shaking in the office not far away, so he immediately sat in and sat at the same table with him. Bai Erlang picked up a few books from the table and handed them over, and Lu Yu was reluctant to pass them on. Bai Shan and Man Bao soon had books on their desks, they propped up the books and lowered their heads to whisper. Mainly Man Bao said it, and Bai Shan listened. Others who didn't care much at first, but a few people close by vaguely heard the word Western regions, so they couldn't help but pricked up their ears to listen. Yin He's eyes were fixed on the book in front of him, but his ears were open to listen, but the voices of the two of them were very low, and he didn't hear anything. Bai Shan glanced at Yin Or's back, and whispered to Man Bao, "I'll ask him about this." Man Bao nodded and wanted to speak. Zhao Liaolang suddenly coughed, and they felt a look from the side. Man Bao and Bai Shan looked up together, and saw Kong Jiju standing outside the window with his hands behind his back, staring at them both. Man Bao slowly sat up straight, opened the book in his hand, lowered his head and pretended to be reading it seriously. Bai Shan opened the book in her hand to the 68th page without changing his face, and said in front of Kong Jiju, "Make a comment on Xiao Wan." Man Bao's eyes fell on the page he opened, "Wan Baimingju, Han Firyushan. My heart is sad, I miss my ancestors." Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief. She knew Zioan in the 10 chapters of Nanshan Mountain. Man Bao rolled up his sleeves and was about to pick up a pen, only to find that they had books on their desk but no ink, let alone paper. She straightened her sleeves with a straight face, lowered her head and continued to read. Kong Jiju stared at them for a while, and turned to leave after making sure that they would not be the demon queen again. As soon as he left, Man Bao let out a breath, but before the breath was out, he knocked on the clapper, and it was time for get out of class. Man Bao. Seeing her expression, Bai Shan couldn't help bursting out a laugh, got up and put away the book. "Let's go, it's dinner time." Bai Shan went to Yin Or after eating. When he came over, Man Bao and Bai Erlang were squatting side by side and poking at the mud in the flower bed. When they saw him coming, they immediately got up and asked, "How is it? Does Yin want to go to the western regions with us?" Bai Shan nodded, "Because things haven't been decided yet, he can't tell us." He looked at Man Bao, "What did Lord Yin say, does he agree?" After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "He didn't say it directly, but I heard that means he agreed." Bai Shan raised his brows and said, "If Yin Yu also goes, we don't have to worry about that person's hands." Man Bao nodded, after all, his father was the one who held the imperial army. Bai Shandao, even if we don't transfer people from the Forbidden Army, the Yin family's generals are not weak. With them leading the way, we won't get lost when we enter the desert. He added, "And there are many important towns along the way. There are people in his family in the army, so it is much easier for us to pass." I have agreed with him. If his father asks about this again, we will intercede for him. But Yin Li didn't give them this chance at all. The next day the emperor's decree came down, first to make Yin Or a man from Ping'an County, and then let him go to the western regions with the imperial hospital mission. Yin Or himself did not expect that his father would invite him to a title first. As soon as the inner servant who announced the decree left, Zhao Liaolang and others immediately surrounded him, and said with envy and jealousy, "Okay, you will have a title in one fell swoop." Zhao Liaolang is the most envious, because even his father can't give him a title. The son is good, the credit is not divided. Yin Li has made a lot of merits over the years, and there is no merit or hard work, but he has never been promoted, and has always stayed in the position of the commander of the Forbidden Army, dutifully guarding the palace gate, and defending the safety of the capital. He keeps all these credits. I heard that he is going to leave it to his grandson. Ahem, naturally it is not Yin Or's son, but the son of Yin Or's sixth sister. Yin Or's sixth sister has been recruited. If there is no accident, the Yin family will be handed over to her son to inherit in the future. The son-in-law Zihu will be demoted by one rank, and the son-in-law will be demoted by another rank, so if the Yin family still wants to keep the marquis, then Yin Li will work very hard and make the emperor very nostalgic before he can make an exception and let his grandson attack the marquis directly. Yin Li is now giving Yin Or asking for a title, naturally using the previous credit, and then his grandson will become the lord, then Yin Li will have to work harder. Yin He received the imperial decree, and everyone couldn't help coaxing him to treat him, for such a big event. Let's not talk about the wine, the 2 tables in the Zhuangyuan building always need it, right? Yin He rolled up the imperial edict and smiled slightly, "If I can go out, I will naturally not begrudge a meal." Everyone remembered that there were still 6 days to go to rest, and couldn't help wailing, shouting, "Then please ask in the palace first." That's right, while it's still hot, we can still eat the pot now. Give the imperial pantry some money to prepare the base of the pot with sheep scorpion stew. We'll cook some dishes to eat, and then make a few snacks. Already? Yes, we are not very demanding. Yin Or was very happy because he achieved what he wanted. He glanced at Bai Shan and the three of them, pursed his lips and smiled, "All right, let's eat the pot." So Yin he took the money to the servant and let him go to the imperial kitchen to prepare it. So the get out of class ended in the afternoon, and everyone left their books and ran to the dormitory. Man Bao also put down his pen and went back after collecting the medical books. In Yin Or's room, the chamberlains separated into a large room, with several tables side by side, and the 9 of them sat just right. "See you tomorrow."